Hi, good afternoon, everyone. We'll begin in a few more minutes as our panelists and some of our participants are also joining in. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us once again for this session on women's access to disaster assistance and social protection in India. As all of you are aware, disasters disproportionately affect women, particularly in accessing essential relief items and social protection services. Women, as primary caregivers in households, often bear the responsibility of managing food, water, health, and other basic needs. In India, while there are various targeted government schemes, there often remain significant gaps in ensuring that women receive timely and adequate access during disasters. So, this webinar aims to highlight the challenges women face in accessing disaster assistance and social protection measures, focusing on areas such as food, nutrition, water supply, household items, clothing, cooking fuel, and healthcare. So we'll also explore potential strategies to strengthen support systems, emphasizing direct benefit transfers to women-headed households and linking relief measures with existing schemes. While there has been wide research and consultation on the topic, we saw the opportunity to share some specific inputs from Sphere India Network based on the experience from various civil society organizations across various disasters over the years. And I would like to thank our very esteemed panelists who have joined us on very short notice, recognizing the significance of the topic, and also our participants for showing interest and engaging with this session. And it's an absolute honor to host and moderate this panel. And we have a very illustrious list of panelists today, including Dr. Aditi Kapoor, co-founder and trustee of Alternative Futures, Ms. Annie George, founding director of Bedrock, Building and Enabling Disaster Resilience of Coastal Communities, Ms. Divya Gupta, associate director, Advocacy and Government Fundraising with Seeds India, Mr. Nikhil Raj, Director of Sustainable Outcomes Private Limited on behalf of UNICEF India, and Ms. Sushmita Mukherjee, Strategic Leader at PCI Advisory Private Limited. So without any further ado, I would like to hear from our experienced panel on the topic. And it's my pleasure to invite our first panelist for today, Ms. Annie George, who has a very extensive experience on all facets of disaster management, including relief and rehabilitation. So based on your experience, ma'am, can you share more about what are the current gaps and challenges that we see in women accessing disaster relief in India, and how we can strengthen direct benefit transfer to women-headed households? Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for your very warm welcome. First of all, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this webinar. It's an absolute honor. I had requested support in uploading my presentation. Could you please help me with that? Thank you. DBT, yes, like what you had pointed out, we do have a lot of problems, not just for women, but also for the other vulnerable communities that we normally see, who are impacted differently from the rest of the other communities. So when I'm speaking about DBT, enhancing DBT access to women, also make it look, go ahead, I mean, the first one. Yeah, please go to the next one. No. Yes, okay. So when we are talking about DBTs, India has been really in the forefront as far as direct benefit transfers have been concerned. If you look at the COVID situation, that was one when our DBT became world famous. Now, if you're looking at what is DBT, an overview of DBT shows that in India, we are looking at DBT through two parallel ways. One is in cash and the other is in kind. When we talk about direct benefit transfer in cash, that is normally through the banks, and this is through one of the yojanas that has been brought in by the central government called the Prime Minister's Jan Dhan Yojana, which speaks about financial inclusion. This is exactly what we are speaking about even when we are talking about disaster responses, when we are talking about increasing the inclusion part of it. Now, if you look at this Jan Dhan Yojana, their website says that 53.61 crore accounts have been opened, of which 55% are women operated, 67 is in the rural areas. Which shows a high degree of penetration into the rural areas, which has never happened before. However, one matter of concern when we talk about DBTs, when we say this has always been an argument between me and other people, when we speak about DBTs as a panacea for all evils, one thing we need to understand is of this 53.61 crore accounts that has been opened, only about 86% are functional. We can look at that as to the reasons as to why they're not functional in the coming few slides. But I would urge you to keep this number in mind, 86.3% functional. And in order to make this Jan Dhan Yojana attractive to people to start opening bank accounts, what the central government did is they started channelizing all the development schemes as well through this Dhan Yojana. 310 schemes involving 53 ministries and departments are being channelized through this Jan Dhan Yojana. It also has things like micro insurance. It also has credit overdraft, a lot of other facilities that is designed to make this package very attractive for people to start accounts. The other in-cash benefit transfer that we normally do is through SHGs, which again, if you look at the Kerala thing after the floods of 2018, they transferred a zero interest 1 lakh loan through the SHGs. So the SHGs are also being seen as a channel for direct benefits to the affected people. Now, in kind, one thing that we always tend to overlook is this direct benefit transfers in kind modalities. And those are through PDS. We normally give relief kits through the PDS with the ration cards as the background authoritating kind of a document. The noon meal schemes, the medical camps that are being held. And the new one is vouchers. That is, it's sort of a conditional mechanism where you give vouchers to certain, which can be redeemed at certain stores, which looks at only certain items. So these are the two kinds of direct benefit transfers in India that we are looking at. Next slide, please. Okay, now this has been, DBTs has actually transformed our welfare delivery schemes. If you, like I said earlier, 350 schemes through 53 line departments, etc. And it has received international recognition as a logistical marvel, especially with the kind of the panorama of different castes and cultures and people, communities that we have. Now, just like what we see in disaster management, that people should live with dignity. Now, this is DBT empowers the beneficiaries because it gives financial control in their hands, enabling them to make informed choices based on their own unique circumstances. We all know that each disaster has got its own unique circumstances, the nuances of the kinds of impacts that it has, etc. Then the reason for the success, if you look back on this, is what we call the JAM triangle. That is the Jan Dhan Yojana, the Aadhaar, and the mobile. This is what is called as a JAM triangle, which is the foundational structures of this a direct benefit scheme, which has made the developmental schemes a huge success. But if you look at the Aadhaar registrations, they currently cover only around 93% is a huge number given our population. Nevertheless, the same reasons that you talk about in disaster as people falling through the cracks, one thing that we got to look at is the 7% who are missed out. Where do they belong? Do they belong to the normally vulnerable communities that we are talking about? Unfortunately, we look at the larger thing of, oh, we've looked at so many people and so many people are covered. And we tend to overlook the 7% of people who are left out. Next slide, please. Okay, of this coverage that we are talking about, when we say that so many schemes are being given through this Yojana, etc., this is a coverage across states. So this is something that we have to keep in mind when we are talking about DBTs in terms of disaster response. If you look at the states, you will find that West Bengal has the least coverage through DBTs, whereas Haryana has the most coverage and the other states fall in between. The table is over there. I'm sure this will be shared with you so you can have the data regarding this. But this is something that we have to keep in mind when we are talking about a blanket approach of talking about DBTs in terms of disaster relief. Remember, disaster relief is an emergency situation. So anything that will not work surely will not work during disasters. So we need to have this coverage in mind before we promote this as a blanket cure-all situation. Next slide, please. Okay. So now what is beneficiary targeting in disasters? You all know high-risk groups that are more vulnerable, which includes older women, women-headed households, people with disabilities. You and I know all this, often face difficulties in accessing post-disaster assistance because they may lack property rights. Now, property rights, the reason why I'm saying it is very important because when the developmental schemes, when we are talking about rehabilitation, when we are talking about recovery, and like what Michelle was saying earlier, when we talk about linking with the development schemes that are already in practice, then comes the gaps between the two. Because as far as disaster is concerned, these are the people we need to look at. But women, for instance, do they have property rights? So when we link it to a developmental scheme in agriculture, which looks at a patta, to say that are you eligible for this or not? So these two do not, this twain will not meet. They may lack or lose key documentation, less likely to know how to work through the system. Now, you know, the initial phase, all of us have this knee-jerk response of saying, okay, hold this, do it as a adalat, things like that. But when it comes to the recovery phase and when we are mainstreaming it with the developmental aspects, there is a clash between the policies that govern disaster response and development. So in these two, how do we work through the system to ensure that this happens? So they'll have to spend multiple days coming to this place, and each day they come to the place through the trying to work through the bureaucratic tangles. That is one day of wage lost for them. So how do we ensure that these kind of issues do not happen? They may not speak the language in which the information is provided, and there is a need for positive targeting. Okay, so, and all the more reason why we talk about development and disaster jointly is that this benefit targeting becomes crucial if SFDRR targets and the SDGs subsequently are to be reached. How do we do this beneficiary targeting? Now, these are the areas where we find problems. Selection criteria. You know, under selection criteria, we tend to look at houses that in disaster, immediate response, that have lost employment for a few days. But losing that employment for a few days may be pushing them into chronic poverty. So we as disaster responders, we look at just say 60 days of benefit under the norms, the MHA's norms. They talk about daily wages equivalent to MNREGA salary for 30 days or 60 days maximum. Now, what happens after that? What happens if the land is not yet brought under cultivation? What happens if people cannot stay there and they have to get another house? So all these kinds of things, the cumulative effect of this is that short-term poverty sometimes leads to chronic poverty. And this we are unable to take on. So when we are registering and identifying beneficiaries, we need to have an annual system of HRVA, which looks at recategorization of houses from transitory to chronic poverty. We have to ensure data accuracy. We have multiple systems which look at data. We have the NSS survey, we have the caste and economic socio something survey, we have the APL, BPL list survey, etc. Now, these lists are not put together. There is no validation of these lists. So if we are preparing a list of people who can avail of such schemes, then it has to be updated and it has to be factually correct. So registering and verifying the eligibility of the beneficiary becomes a huge task. And generally, that is not done periodically. Ideally, it should be done on an annual basis. Then we should look at it as a part of the 15th Finance Commission. There is provision under preparedness for availing of funds for activities that can lead to resilience and preparedness. We should be looking at this kind of HRVA, which is looking at poverty and looking at targeting of beneficiaries as a part of that preparedness and resilience building exercise, which is done during the peacetime. The next thing is the systems that need to be in place. It's not enough just to identify beneficiaries. What are the systems that need to be in place? Next slide, please. Yes. So the key systemic requirements for this DBT is digital infrastructure. We have improved a lot in terms of ATMs, in terms of banks, etc. But it needs connectivity is a problem, power supply is a problem. So the digital infrastructure that we have currently is not enough to support the kind of disaster response that is required, because in usual scenarios, this happens in areas, disasters normally strike areas, the fragile areas which are away from such facilities. So how do we ensure that that structure is there? Digital literacy. And this is impossible for the government to do on its own. So this is where a very strong partnership between the governments and the grassroots organizations needs to be built up and built up on trust. Then synergy among departments. So this is very crucial because the agriculture department has a scheme. They start admitting people under bank accounts. They ask people to have. The women women and child development has some other schemes. So they promote accounts among people who are their beneficiaries. So you have different accounts under different schemes. Getting all this together is a need that requires to be done. Unfortunately, because of the demonetization and a lot of piggy banking on this Jan Dhan Yojana schemes, a lot of banks have put an upper limit on what is the amount that can be deposited into this account. So what happens is, like what we found in Assam, the MNREGA scheme asks you to open an account, but there is a limit placed on it. And so when we tried putting the disaster response amounts into that, the accounts refused to accept that amount because there was a limit on it. And a lot of people did not get it, and they did not know why they did not get it. So there are these kinds of aspects that happen. There should be transparency in data sharing, even between the departments. To help this, ensuring data security. We are very blithely going around, say, asking our field staff to collect Aadhaar details, to collect bank account details, without actually ensuring data security. So how do we ensure this data security so that this is not mismanaged later? Then strengthening monitoring, absolutely important, because once we set the scheme rolling, are people actually getting it? Why are they not getting it? Those kinds of monitoring systems need to be put into place, which is going down to the grassroots, which is again an expensive, time-consuming proposition. Aligning of policies and practices. This happened recently in Kerala, where after the Wayanad landslide, 10,000 rupees per person was put into the bank account. Now, the banks which already had outstanding loans against these people, they deducted that amount before giving the remaining amount to the person. So those kinds of things have to be avoided. But those are rules that govern not only the bank, but also the SHG. The SHG also cannot provide amounts unless the outstanding loan amount is deducted. So how do we, so the amount really doesn't reach the person. So how do we ensure that these kinds of gaps are identified and the people are protected from these kinds of things? Then we need a robust grievance redressal mechanism. This is where a lot of us fail because these things are not put in place. And continuous technology, this is expensive, continuous technology updates. How far can poor states go ahead with doing this? So again, going back to what is the state's how are the states being ranked on DBT, you will find that a lot of states probably are not able to do it because they do not have the financial wherewithals to set up these systems. So again, you come back to this fact that this has to be done very judiciously. Next slide, please. So what is the way forward to use DBTs as a tool for efficient and timely disaster response? A lot of policy level things need to be done. We need to have an annual HRVA exercise, which also looks at bank accounts, available bank accounts, seeing that they have the social, that they are protected under the social protection mechanisms. So a lot of this preparatory work needs to be done even prior to the disaster. And for that, we need a policy level intervention, preferably from the national level. Then covering temporary and chronic poverty levels, ensuring data accuracy and validity, APL versus BPL, socioeconomic caste census, these lists do not really match. So how do, from the policy level, how do we ensure that it matches? Data sharing between service providers for synergic responses. You ask the department, even today, if you ask some of those DDMAs or SMAs, which are the people who are beneficiaries, we may not get that because they don't want to make it transparent due to many reasons. There could be very good reasons for it, but unless that is provided, we'll not be able to move forward. So how do we do this data sharing without actually affecting confidentiality? Revisiting of criteria for eligibility and aligning between post-disaster response and development response. This is something that only can be done at the policy level. We need to ensure that the people are protected even while they are going into a recovery period. And as a part of this, one of the questions that will keep coming up is, what about the point of cash disbursement? How do we look at it? So if you are looking at that, you will, there is a business correspondent model which is designed to reach hard to reach areas. If you look at the Wayanad situation, in the camps, there were desks for the different banks so that they could provide money on immediate basis to people who had lost their documents. So if we can also provide for business correspondents to be at these camps, then the transfer of cash could be a much simpler format. Operational level, promoting digital inclusion, including reactivating of the non-active accounts. And for this, you really need grassroots level people who will have the facility, flexibility, and the time to follow up on each and every individual cases, promoting awareness creation. This is a must. Most of the people do not even know that life insurance schemes or accident insurance schemes are there and they're eligible for it. So how do we promote this awareness? Ensuring total coverage of social security mechanisms. Again, there are issues which says that if you're a widow, then some governments prefer to wait till she is 50 so that they can give her just old age pension and save on the widow pension. So how do we ensure that such duplications are avoided, but at the same time, there's a coverage of the social security mechanisms? Partnering with local players, providing platforms and help desks for grievance redressal. This would be very necessary in the aftermath of a disaster. Follow-up and monitoring, again, partnering with grassroots level organizations would be extremely helpful in this. And the SHGs to be actively involved because they would be the best to identify not just the beneficiaries, but also the gaps in the system and also the issues that come up in the system. So the SHGs, if they can be partnered with at the grassroots level to ensure that this happens, that would be our greatest strength. Next one, please. So the DBT framework is in place. If you look at Aadhaar, like they said, 93%. If you look at bank accounts, again, it talks about more than 60% or 80 something percent. So the framework is in place and it is strong. What it requires now is a committed approach. And this committed approach cannot be done just by the government. So it's useless for us to say, but government is not doing this, but government is not doing that. How do we work together to, with a committed approach to ensure that all the dots are connected, all this falls into place? and we leave no one behind. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for highlighting many of the challenges that we have in the current system, including challenges of linking both development schemes as well as disaster relief schemes in the same account, and governance and operational challenges that come with piggy banking these schemes, and also the digital infrastructure that should keep up in terms of how these schemes are operational and executed, and annual and periodic HRV assessments to ensure that these DBTs are effective, and also just to be mindful of DBT as a blanket approach when we talk about disaster relief and access to various schemes, particularly for high-risk individuals and affected populations. Thank you so much. I would like to invite our next panelist, Ms. Divya Gupta, who has significant experience in humanitarian settings and emergency operations. Divya ma'am, if I can request you to highlight some case studies. So our last speaker just shared about what are some of the challenges that exist when it comes to operationalization of these schemes and framework. So if you can highlight some case studies and best practices in gender responsive disaster relief and how that looks like.
Sure.
Over to you.
Is my screen visible?
Yes, ma'am.
So considering time, I took only few case studies here. How during the peace period we can strengthen the capacity of women and make them decision maker in this whole economic circle, and also provide them authorization to make the decisions and become the owner of that amount. That is very important. So this is how we tried in some way. In Sundarban area for last 5 years, we are trying to engage women in environment development through few activities like mangroves plantation, development of mangroves, and vetiver grass production, and how they can repair their embankment, and they can repair their local water bodies, how they can rejuvenate them, and how they can earn from these items. So these women are not just engaged in these livelihood activities, they are also protecting their environment, they are also protecting their families from the further disasters, which will be normally these areas are highly affected from the cyclone, floods, and other hazards. So these women are these women belong to SHGs. They are part of SHGs. So initially they were learned how to run or manage their self-help group, how to do the small savings, and intensive trainings were done related to saving, related to mangroves plantation, related to vetiver grass plantation, and related to disaster management. So these trainings help them to get engaged in this work. Now these women are leading the entire show. Not just they revive their mangroves, not just they revive their water bodies, but also they are earning well through these productions, because this vetiver grass, this converted into few products. Now they are started producing those items and selling them locally. So it is helping them in a three ways. Number one is to protect them from further disasters. Number two is earning, and number three is protecting the environment of that particular pocket. And now we are trying to extend this program beyond that particular block where we were working in Pathar Pratima. Now we are starting the similar actions in other blocks. So these are some. So in the Bihar, we learned in last few years, like cattle and livestock are the major play a major part in the women role in the rural, especially states like Bihar, because whatever earning is happening in family, normally farming earning goes to the men, but these the cattle and livestock, because women are handling them on a daily basis, they are selling the milk, they are selling other things, so they are earning this money. And what happened during the disaster, they lost. Even within this month also, we have witnessed in Bihar, mostly in the affected areas, people lost their livelihood, livestock, and they lost their cattle. So how these women can help to protect their, especially the livestock and the cattle, through their cattle sheds, raising the height of their cattle shed, created a proper infrastructure, keeping some stockpiling for their fodders, and proper timely veterinary services and continuity of veterinary services during the emergencies. So these women are could save their animals also, and now they are earning very well. And through this support, we have provided them a few animals and also the entire knowledge and veterinary services. And now these women are also supporting other women of the community and providing the similar knowledge and information, and to help them to protect their own animals. So we all know the animals play a very, very important economical role, especially in the rural women's life. So this is how we are trying to ensure their economical continuity during the emergency. So there will be a less loss and also the continuity of their income. These are the women. And in a Puri Orissa post cyclone Fani, these women, these local women, they created a resilient fund for themselves, and they started putting a small amount in that fund. And during COVID, this activity could test it out, because during COVID, when there was nothing, they were completely unable to go for the work. Their husbands and the family members, they were unable to go back to the work. This small amount helped them to bring the food and bring the essential items to their families. So it is a very first kind of interventions happen in India. And recently, Sphere India and Reliance, they covered this story in their publication also. So these women, initially one group, and then a huge group of women, they started saving this amount, and this amount they are utilizing during the emergency. Because normally what happened, when there is cyclone, when there is any other emergency, the government just evacuated them and put them at a safer location. But there are so many essential items they require immediately: sanitary napkins, food, water, small items they require. But for everything they require the immediate money in their hand, then only they can manage. So this fund is helping them to catering their own essential needs during the emergency, and it is running very well. And in the same area, it could tested in another cyclone and in another COVID response. So these are the women. They created this fund. This is their own fund. In Nepal also, while we were doing the shelter constructions, local women, they helped us a lot to complete this task on a time, and also to understand the local the culture and local wisdom, what kind of house women are required. Because normally what happened, most of the time women, the major time women used to spend in the house, while other people go out for some hours or something. But if you know, women, the majorly women used to stay there, and they handle the whole work like wash and other items they used to manage. So their understanding regarding the design, regarding the everything, was quite important. And for completing task on a time, it is required their physical contribution also. So these women, they become the mason, they attend the training, they become the trained mason, and then they constructed their own houses on a later. So this is not just left them for the construction of their own house or their neighboring houses, but also a good skill into them, which help them to continue their services beyond the construction of these particular houses. Now many of them are earning very well, just because of that skill built during this post earthquake in Nepal. So engaging women is very much important during the response, during the recovery, because if we see, they are the most vulnerable among other affected community members, and they know the economic thing better than the men of that family, because they had to handle everything, they had to manage everything. So their understanding, their knowledge is too much required. And also, if they will be the decision maker, then definitely there will be no there will be, that money will be utilized only for the benefit of the family, not for their own enjoy or their own entertainment. So this is very important. So these are few case studies I try to bring here, but we have many other such case studies also. So I have given my mail ID and phone number. If colleague want, I can share. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing more about more examples on how we can proactively engage women through SHGs in livelihood and ecosystem restoration while giving them access to resources and ownership of their own relief and recovery as well. I would like to invite our next panelist, a seasoned development professional and economist who has been working on the topic of social protection and gender, among other areas, Mr. Nikhil Raj. Sir, if you can share some lessons and insights on gender responsive humanitarian cash transfer.
Uh, Thank you. Is it possible to share my screen?
Yes, sir, you should be able to share the screen.
Okay, right. Great, thank you. So, thank you to Sphere India for inviting me to share some of the understanding and assignment that we recently did in partnership with the NDMA, UNICEF, and we had shared this earlier. This was on some of the policy perspectives and potential actions. I will not rather go in here for the kind of vulnerabilities that women face. We have been hearing it for the last half an hour from colleagues. But given these vulnerabilities related to livelihoods, the RCH issues, shelter, gender-based violence, etc., one finds that there are both immediate threats as well as long-term challenges, ranging from loss of livelihoods and mental health issues in the long run. Now, what we wanted to look at that, okay, yes, there is an intersectionality between social protection, DRR, and women's special needs. And some of these things can be linked to the broader macroeconomic frameworks, particularly within the DRM and social protection constructs that we have in the country as of now. Also, the Prime Minister's 10-point agenda does talk about, a shift from the male-dominated decision-making structures and strengthening the SHGs, what my previous colleague was just talking about as a way out to address women's special needs during disaster. So, when we do talk about it, there are some basic principles for linking the three aspects, the social protections, the DRR, and the women's assistance aspects. One is that we need to include all impacted women. And what does it therefore entail? Then we need to expand the definition, because many a time the programs are narrow focused, and therefore the definitions of the impacted women could be narrow. Cash assistance, as everybody continues to reiterate, and we all believe as development professionals and practitioners and the research community that yes, it is important through existing social protection program to enhance the resilience part. Preparedness, more in terms of the TRM assistance, positioning the supplies, well-trained responders, and the range of training programs that Sphere India also does undertake for preparing these disaster responders also is another aspect. in terms of the principle. I'm just taking quickly through the broad principles. Early warning systems again, and integrating them with the early action will be crucial for these kinds of conceptualization. Real-time monitoring of the emerging needs, and how can one do that, which would mean that one should use the best possible technology to monitor the situation at the ground level. Social registry, as the pandemic and the Jandhan, Aadhaar, and mobile, the Jam Trinity, when it began earlier in the last decade, has also brought us closer to the whole idea of a social registry where information on the potential people who would be needing certain help can be extracted from an integrated social registry connected through various technology interfaces. One important part is that we all believe that yes, one needs to minimize the exclusion era in disaster responses. I mean, a few here and there, if a person like me is also affected, maybe, if I do get included, should not be a big area of concern as far as the delivery of services and social protection is concerned. Clear protocols, as Annie was also mentioning when we did this study jointly together as part of a broader UNICEF NDMA initiative, prioritizing and developing clear protocols will be important. Also, my previous speaker did talk about how capacity building, and I can see that in the list of people who are participating in this discussion, there are a few who have mentioned their captions as somebody who are working in the realm of disaster response, particularly as action people. And hats off to such experts as the ground level responders. So capacity building of more and more people, such as the Sphere India and NIDM, that they keep on doing, will continue to be important. And there has to be a very, very clear, anticipatory, adequate and action-related strategy to leverage social protection schemes. So what we are emphasizing is that the social protection needs in the case of disasters should be anticipated, they need to be adequate, and must be actionable. I mean, these are the three other dimensions of Principle 9. Logistics and coordination continues to form the bedrock. Now, while I was talking about the general and UNICEF colleagues and at NDMA, we think that it is important to look at certain specifics. What could be those specific actions which the NDMA and the concerned nodal people in the Ministry of Home could potentially consider? Now, if what we did was that our starting point was the approved norms of assistance under the SDRF, NDRF. And then we tried to look at that, okay, what does a particular line item say? And then what are the gaps in that, and what therefore needs to be. So if one looks at that gender sensitivity, there is no existing additional support. And therefore, that is an area of concern, particularly for women. So what we are saying is that in the initial 30 days, wages to women could be given without a corresponding Manrega work to take care for their care duties. Noting that, and friends, as we would all be aware of, that the recent budget has emphasized on the care economy, the role of women, and how monetizing the care economy can also lead to enhanced women labor force participation. So in the context of disaster management, an extension of the NREGA support to women in lieu of their care duties, which could be for children, which could be for differently abled or old age people in the family, that amount could be given. And this way, one can address some part of the gender inequalities that are faced. In case of longer period of impact, perhaps a longer duration of support could be considered. What we also find that there is no support for added burden, as I mentioned, and loss of economic opportunity. So therefore, one has to go in for an enhanced needs assessment, going through one major scheme that is for children and pregnant and lactating women, and in the context of uh, uh, women who are in need of special support. We did work out that what could be the range of support for a 25-day period, which would be that, okay, if a woman is attending to an elderly person and has a child under 6 years, then the woman gets 600 rupees for the elderly, against the elderly person, which is and the another 200 rupees on account of the 1 month supplementary nutrition. So this way, we have worked about 4 or 5 cases. Why did we do this? Friends, what is important is that doing so allows a typical officer sitting in the ministry or the SDMA or the NIDM or the district resource authorities, district disaster management authorities, to actually look at that, okay, where does X woman belong to, and it is easy to do the transfers. Obviously, this is not an exhaustive one, but when we did prepare, we said that yes, doing these kinds of preparation and enhanced needs assessment and keeping these on paper as far as approved norms could help reduce women's gender inequality and address women's special need during disasters. Uh, so water is an important area which continues to be a challenge. And then we did look at that the SDRF and NDRF does talk about provision of a water container, but there is no existing provision for loss of education. So we said that, okay, if some kind of continuity of services have to be maintained, cater to the differentiated needs of women and children. So women have to take care of the kitchen, have to take care of the food, cooking, cleaning, etc. But at the same time, it is a women sometimes, has also to take care of children. And if the continuity of educational services by way of access to internet, etc., could be maintained, then their education will not be affected. And we have seen this as part of a health emergency during the pandemic when many families did not have the basic data. So we just looked at assuming 2 children, school-going children in a family, and therefore 269 per child or 300 per child could be earmarked, and that could be given immediately to the women for operationalization of the string of principles for continuity of services. And once again, I would like to reiterate that we are not digressing too much from the already approved norms of assistance. So that is something, and we have tried to keep ourselves within the ambit of the approved norms of assistance of SDRF and DRF. At the same time, saw those windows of opportunity as areas where we could do some minor tweaks here and there and see that what could be just fitted in. So it's just a narrow space, and we were trying to get a foot into the door. So same goes for the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana. So even if a woman is not covered as is not a part of a priority household, the impacted woman could be considered as a priority group. And for either rice consuming areas or wheat consuming areas, we did some calculation and we said that, okay, this amount could be considered to be transferred to the Chandhan account. And this pertains to the existing norms, approved norms of assistance under the listed line item. I don't want to get into the specifics, but again, coming to social protection, we found that in the existing norms, there is no mention of sanitation and hygiene facilities for the household level. And although there are community level assistance mentioned under a specific line item, we do recommend full amount of assistance under the Swachh Bharat to households having no toilets or whose toilets have been destroyed in the course of disaster. DBT for exactly some of the colleagues also mentioned for the Dignity Kit, we did a cost estimation and to the amount tune of 350 rupees. Similarly, for no provision for dry fuel for cooking during disasters, So can we think of a one LPG cylinder and the cash against that under the extended PM Ujwala? So these are the various kinds that we are talking about. One important part is related to the compensation for damage to houses. And we said that wherever the households who were homeless, they are not covered. And therefore, we say that in case the house is built, then one needs to ensure that the title deeds of the property are in the names of the women to reduce her vulnerability in future. Obviously, I mean, broader levels of partnerships with stakeholders such as SDMA, PRIs, SHGs, again, previous speakers have also mentioned about it, would be critical to it. Social registry, as I've already said, would be important, but one needs to continuously update the social registry to facilitate use of social protection entitlements. It just cannot be done at the time when the disaster strikes. So the 15th Finance Commission recommendations provide for some kind of window where one can leverage some degree of collaboration. As you would see that there is nothing on the aspect of mental health and psychosocial support. This is a special need which has emerged particularly during the emergencies. And all professionals in the room would also agree that if I am correct, the UN Secretary General had gone on record to say that it was a shadow pandemic for the women. Because it was, therefore, of sorts. And gender-based violence, unwanted pregnancy, issues of, extra burden of work, and was also leading to various aspects of mental health and anxieties. So fully subsidized treatments should be available, and Telemanus was tried out. This would need to be expanded, obviously, through a wider set of public-private partnerships. Do let me know if I'm extending time, but very quickly, women's leadership and enhancing SHG's capacities. This is there as part of the PM's 10-point agenda. But the existing norms of assistance, they do not provide any existing role of women SHGs in relief work. We do recommend strongly that Gram Panchayats could register women and SHGs for various kinds of activities such as the debris clearance and restoration against which they are paid. So there is a norm of assistance, there is a particular line item. Anybody who works to clear the debris or restoration of agriculture routine would be paid X amount. So we are saying that why can't SHG workers be trained in here, and also they be given priority as far as allocation of work by the Gram Panchayats is concerned. Similarly, access to resources, whether it is for very micro entrepreneurs or artisans, there is a particular line item. We do recommend that this could be clubbed and transferred at an SHG level. And how does one finance it? Obviously, there was one window which we found was a National Handloom Development Program and Weavers Mudra Program for assured sources for credit. So the idea is to extend grants, cash assistance, or loans to SHGs for immediate relief and long-term projects, rehabilitation projects. My last thing and submission is from our side is that in case of nature-based solutions, assistance at differential rates are provided, but this assistance is subject to a range of conditions. And therefore, there are no norms for equitable financial support for women. So we have recommended how money transfer can be done to women's account where women own land and where a woman's owner, and which is a higher likelihood because, I mean, not more than 10 or 12% of the total land ownership would be in a woman's name. So this is a likely possibility, and therefore the woman should get 50% of the aid if they work as agriculture labor in the household. So both in terms of immediate cash and prioritizing support to women, nature-based solutions into disaster response for recovery efforts would be a way to enhance the resilience among women for promoting sustainable development. And that's all from my side, friends. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Dr. Nikhil, for sharing about the principles on how we can improve women's access to disaster assistance and social protection, and also specific tweaks we can make in current and existing norms of disaster assistance to ensure that it's more gender responsive, and for sharing the findings from your study as well. As you also mentioned, so this is the perfect time to introduce our next speaker also. Our final panelist for today, Ms. Shushmita Mukherjee, brings a treasure trove of experience in designing impactful and transformative interventions for gender equity and youth development. Ma'am, as a previous panelist highlighted, one of the often still neglected aspects of women's assistance is mental health and psychosocial support. And it's towards this that I would like you to shed some light on what is the current scenario and also gaps and challenges.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, definitely many thanks to Sphere Academy for introducing this discussion through this webinar. No doubt, mental health is a very, very crucial and essential aspect, and it is kind of unreported, very silently borne by everybody. Hence, really thanks to Sphere Academy for giving this opportunity to me to talk about it. Can I share my slides?
Yes.
Please help me to let me know if the slides are visible.
Yes, they are visible, ma'am.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about mental health and psychosocial support for women in humanitarian situations with a reflection from India. So, you know, mental health is one of the, currently it's become a buzz, but it is definitely a long existing, ever existing status of ill health, which has been long ignored and always faced a lot of stigma and discrimination, which has been the reason why people have been very silent about it. There is a lot of hesitation in our society to really talk about it, and the acceptance and acknowledgement of existence a poor or a low mental health compatibility status is also very much stigmatized. As you can see, if I'm bringing in the social determinants of mental health, entire socio-ecological system, the ecosystem of us, starting from ourselves and up to the policies and programs within the ambience that we live in. Every layer of our ecosystem has an effect on our mental health. And this is further emphasized by the social norms, the normative features that we stay on or live in, that we are continuously trying to adjust ourselves, also push us for a lot of mental health ill health status. So what are the key facts? Let's switch to the humanitarian situations to be imprecise given the today's topic. So almost all people, irrespective of their social, economical, and political status, almost all people are affected by emergencies and do experience psychological distress. However, different people take different time to improve upon. As per the WHO, among people who have experienced war or other conflict in the last 10 years, 1 in 5, at least around 22%, do have been facing depression, anxiety, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorders, bipolar disorders, or schizophrenia. People with severe mental disorders are especially vulnerable during emergency situations and definitely do need access to mental health care and other basic needs. And in all these, women and children, because of their social construct, are definitely one of the vulnerable and most impacted ones here. So no doubt, some of my previous speakers also mentioned about women's status, their vulnerabilities and different things. And let me pick up the mental health as a problem. So we need to understand that mental health does not get triggered only because they are experiencing the emergency situation or some crisis in their life. So mental health is a pre-existing status, and any disaster or any crisis moment just triggers the levels up. So situations like depression, situations like stress and anxieties are always, there's a possibility of pre-existing. Then there is emergency induced special mental health situations, which can cause grief, acute stress reactions, harmful use of alcohol and drugs can be triggered, depression and anxiety, and including post-traumatic stress and disorders. And then humanitarian response induced mental health problems. There can be anxiety due to lack of information about, let's say, when the humanitarian support or the food distribution is going to come. There are the basic services. Where are my family members and all those things? So these are various categories and layers of the mental health problem that we need to recognize and acknowledge their presence, so that when we are trying to understand and design our services for that, it is appropriate and focused accordingly. Some of the challenges that many a times go, miss out in our functioning is that women in, how do we see women? So it's not an homogeneous and one persona. So you have to understand that women across the age, across the life stages, across their social construct do differ and have different types of psychological distress and the trauma that they may go through. As some of my previous speakers were saying, that we can have women who are very old age with very limited mobilities and other abilities, then women who can be pregnant and lactating, then women who may have teenagers and toddlers as dependents, women who are single. So we have to understand that with around all these contexts, what is the context in which the women are we talking of, and accordingly, what sort of trauma or anxiety then they go through. Similarly, we have found a lot of instances that humanitarian situations do trigger gender-based violence a lot, especially targeting women, women, girls, and young children. This because of the total lack and loss of the care, nurture, the justice, the protection measures around the social protection that we get. There is always a higher incidence we have found in different humanitarian situations, whether they are natural cause or human induced. The third is the challenges that we generally find is that in spite of mental health being nowadays one of the spoken and really identified area of work, there is very limited access to mental health services. In India, particularly, we know that our country has national mental health policy. There is a designed national mental health program. However, the actual access to the services by the beneficiaries on ground zero is almost zero. So limited access to the mental health services is another reason that why many of the sufferings remain suffering for a long time, in spite there may be a materialistic gain or some sort of recovery being done. So what can be done? Definitely things can be done, and we all have to join hands together to acknowledge, assist in dealing with mental health issues. And the first and the foremost, and I think the most important, is the community-based psychosocial support. It is very essential because we as human beings are social living beings, and hence the support of the society, being in a society, being included in society is very essential and good for our mental health. So hence community-based support in terms of counseling is very essential. as my previous speaker has been talking of the collectives, the women collectives or the self-help groups, it is very essential that we establish such support groups in the communities so that they can come into action during the need of the hour. We need to raise a lot of awareness to reduce the stigma and the discriminations, to reduce the hesitations, to enhance people more report and talk about it. Women as community health workers can also provide a lot of peer support and facilitate access to mental health services. And in all these things, the involvement of community leaders is very essential. And when we say community leaders, it should include not only the elected representatives, but also the caste leaders, the religious leaders, the women leaders, the influencers who are the go-to persons who can really empathize about the community members and help to establish and the efficient management of the service provisions in their community. So hence, community-based psychosocial support is very essential. We have found that during the tsunami in 2004, when people were on one side constantly working on providing the safety, constantly providing on the medical side, but mental health was one of the most critical aspects that people were really looking for. And many of the counseling, the community-based counseling in disasters was something that the Indian, civil society organizations were really piloting with and how to establish it. But that has really told us that how to do it and what to do and what not to do in it, because a lot of child safeguarding issues and the human safeguarding issues also needs to be very much done, and ethics come into play in it. The second is at the policy and the system level, where it is very essential to integrate the mental health and psychosocial support into the disaster response framework. We know that National Disaster Management Authority have released the mental health guidelines as well, but actuation and actualization of those things to the ground zero is something which we have to do, who are the workers during the humanitarian situations. It is essential for us to establish the safe spaces for women and girls where they can receive counseling and other social support. And I think it is very essential now, after the country having the national mental health policy and also the disaster-based mental health guidelines being available, that mental health be included in our primary care system. We know that our country, with its huge population, do lack the number of health service providers we have. But then this is very crucial and very needed that we now ensure that our primary healthcare system do includes a crucial component of delivery of mental health services as well. Then the support for displaced populations is my next what can be done. In the conflict areas, particularly, we have to ensure that we are trying to look into that what is the trauma that people are facing. As I mentioned, and all of us who are in this webinar are working in humanitarian situations, do know that we have to understand the trauma that people are going through, what is the reasons, what are the inducements on all those things, so that accordingly our support is focused and shaped accordingly. The legal assistance and the livelihood support to rebuild their lives much better than, so that we can improve their resiliency and coping up mechanisms. No doubt, as my previous speakers have been mentioning, that collaboration with local NGOs and local leaders is very essential. Here comes the role of the self-help groups and the women collectives, who exactly know the local resources that are available and how to provide those services. Then addressing gender-based violence, we need to have, we heard just about the telemanus, but maybe something more proactive and functional and easy to access to the last mile population needs to be done in terms of helplines and online counseling services. We need safe shelters. Currently, India has a tremendous lack of safe shelter home for women who have been going through a lot of distress in their family and the social setups. That needs to be set up, and especially in humanitarian situations, a lot of awareness is very essential. When I am talking of awareness, it's just not knowing about A for apple. It's also about bringing up the ability to, and your resiliency to a level where you are able to act when you are in distress. So as I just mentioned that during crisis, everybody goes through a psychological trauma. But during that trauma, if you are not able to act as per the information that you have, then that still has not been really helpful to you. Hence, the campaigns not only to educate, but also to help women to help themselves is very essential and help others. So, as I mentioned, we have to ensure that we are ready in our pre-disaster stage when we are developing our prevention strategies, mitigation, and the preparedness for it. No doubt, our country has done an umpteen number of mapping that which are our at least disaster prone areas where there is a possibility of getting into humanitarian situations. We have to ensure that it's not only a tick box activity, but also on execution that we have incorporated the mental health and psychosocial support services therein. There is no dearth of the guidelines and the SOPs on it. Similarly, the post-disaster, definitely that's the talk of the hour, but there needs to be an essentially done that it should not get ignored. We have to ensure that our systems are geared, our capacity building is done to ensure that it is inclusive of all sorts of hazards. Social justice should not be compromised at all. It should not be discriminatory in nature, even by caste or religion or economic levels at all. Trauma-informed, risk-focused. We have to ensure that the whole of society is benefited with our thing, and culturally sensitive and appropriate counseling should be provided. There are the huge chances when we have a big spectrum of the society being impacted. There, we always hear a lot of immediate and the first aid services reach out to the high levels of the society, then the lower levels of the society. Maybe sometimes the messaging is very pro to some particular cohorts of the society. So as volunteers, as humanitarian workers, as mental health service providers, we have to ensure that we are not limiting anything. We are holistic. We are looking at that how to deal with pregnant and lactating women, how to look into the geriatric women, how to look into the adolescent women, how to look at people with different types of abilities. So that's very essential for us to ensure. So on to my last slide, I would really like to say that preparedness is the key. We talk a lot, we know that this is the buzz, but have we prepared ourselves? Is our cadre ready? And it's not only about the information, it's not about the education level, but it is also to build their resiliency. It is also to build that are their nerves really high up to the level that they can act during the crisis. And that's where the level we have to do. If we are like, on one hand, we're really training how to train our astronauts, how to have a situation of zero gravity on Earth as well. So we have to do a similar kind of stimulated and simulated exercises and such capacity building so that we can really act during those crisis times, because that's where our mental health is triggered towards a downfall and we miss out on many of the things in spite of us knowing all of them. With that, I'd like to say thank you and stop here for any questions or answers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing about how we can integrate mental health and psychosocial support for women in disaster assistance, and some strategies for how we can do that, and what are the current gaps and challenges as well. With that, we have finished interventions from our panelists, and we also have some questions in the chat box. I see one from Grijesh from NCDHR. Brijesh, if you would like to unmute yourself and share more about your comment and also the question, and if any of the panelists are willing to take this question.
Thank you very much. I am Grijesh. I am from NCDHR. We are majorly working for the Dalit and Adivasi communities in India, and I am looking after the disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. In our organization. So, what I have experienced that Dalit women, because we are talking about Dalit women, so I would like to share about the Dalit women, the exclusion of Dalit women and less access to the relief packages and the social welfare schemes and the schemes for the social security. My experience is quite different from Annie ma'am, and yeah, of course, other speakers have majorly spoke about the current available scenario, and also the mechanism which is available in India. But unfortunately, the Dalit community, especially the Dalit women, are the least benefited communities, and they are facing acute challenges in during the disaster. And we have some studies. If you want, I can also share the link with you. Anyway, it is available on NCDHR website. So in states like Tamil Nadu and Odisha, Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh, and other states where we are working, the Dalit women have least access to these schemes. So I want to know if any of the speakers have segregated data about the Dalit women, because the government any state government does not do not come up with the segregated data for Dalit and Dalit women especially. So there it is very difficult to trace the population of the Dalit community where they are being deprived, and how we can bring these communities into the mainstream, and also to ensure the access to these relief packages and the schemes. So any of the panelists, if you want to respond on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brijesh, for sharing that. If the panelists, if you would like to answer her query. Annie ma'am, if you're still available, or Dr. Nikhil. Meanwhile, Krishna. Yeah.
If the other one is also an associated question, let them ask the question and we'll handle both together.
Michelle, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. So we also have a question from Baba Sarkar on we need to analyze the cash transfer program before execution, because if the market is not functional, then cash will not work, and a post-distribution monitoring is also important to understand the quality. This is the comment.
Yes. Okay, so I'll take the question on Dalit women first. Yes, I understand where you're coming from. There are a whole lot of these intersectionalities where women become more and more vulnerable. So while we speak about pregnant women or women with disabilities or elderly women, the caste part of it is not brought into consideration generally. While there are pros and cons to that aspect of it, what we would normally be looking at are the other objectively verifiable indicators, so to speak, on how does one select a beneficiary. So you remember we were speaking about eligibility criteria. Now, these are areas where eligibility criteria, one, becomes very important, and two, understanding eligibility criteria in terms of deprivation rather than just in terms of being where you are or a member of a certain community. So if we can derive verifiable, objectively verifiable indicators along with gender and physical status and things like that, and get the community's consensus. That is, we have a joint approach to identification of the beneficiaries, including in things like wealth ranking, access to systems, etc. Then, to a large extent, the problem that you're speaking about can be solved. While I do understand your frustration, I would also say sometimes looking at it just through one lens can lead to problems. So always superimpose that particular lens with other indicators, which can tell you that the parameters are just and accepted by everybody. So I hope I have not rubbed you the wrong way by saying this. It is not that I'm against human rights, but I'm only talking about how to make it more transparent and more objectively verifiable and more as a community-driven exercise where everybody agrees that, yes, these are the genuine beneficiaries who require support. The second point that was raised by Michelle from the chat box on cash transfers, which are useless if the local markets are not activated. We fully agree. So when we talk about recovery, immediate recovery, we speak about an enabling environment where revival of the local market is very important. And we need to ensure that the roads to that market is cleared. We need to ensure that the flooding of that place is removed so that people can access these markets. We need to ensure that materials are reaching that shop. So kickstarting the local economy can be done by generating a local demand. And that local demand can be generated by transferring cash to that person's account. So you see how these are interrelated. The only thing is, while you're giving cash or if you're giving vouchers, please ensure that you do not link that voucher to a large departmental store or something out of those premises. If you can link it to local markets, you will also be helping in kickstarting that economy. So the activation of the local markets is accelerated by increasing demand, and that demand is accelerated through giving cash transfers. I hope I've answered your question.
Thanks, Annie ma'am, for taking that question. I see one more question from Esther. It's if we are recommending SHGs, what specific training and capacity building initiatives are provided to SHG members for disaster risk reduction, and how accessible are these programs? Divya ma'am, if you're available and on call, if you can take this question.
Yes, can you please repeat the question? You're on mute.
What specific training and capacity building initiatives are provided to SHG members for disaster risk reduction, and how accessible are these programs?
Yeah. So especially for the Sundarban and Bihar, we have provided them training related to the continuity of services during the emergencies. We have done few mock drills with these women plus other community members, and also make them community leaders, the important key pillars, while these particular Gram Panchayat were preparing their GPDP plan, so they could include their disaster preparedness into their GPDP plans. So these three types of training, but directly related to disaster management. But other than these training, we have provided them how to strengthen their self-help groups, because earlier they were doing, few of them were associated with the SHG groups, but they were just they were just saving the amounts, but they were not doing any livelihood related activities through their SHGs. So, along with the development, the disaster management, we have also supported them and try to strengthen the self-help group system through proper paperwork, proper knowledge, what are the policies related to them, what kind of programs are there, how they can leverage those programs, like that. Thank you.
Yeah, just to add here to this response, I at the National Rural Livelihood Mission, which actually takes care of the self-help group program in India, there is no national as such, like, periodic training on DRR yet established. But time to time, NRLM does do organize, and the respective state SRLMs also do organize some bit of training for their cadres as well. I think this is also a point of advocacy with the government that, how through convergence, different departments can strengthen themselves to deal with it. So self-help groups, that is why, because of their local presence, because of their collective agency they hold, is one of the most potential, most potential platform to help in humanitarian situations. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, Bihar has started this initiative. Not all the states, only few states are making some efforts in that. Bihar has started, and last year Orissa also included in their state level plan, and Assam. This year Assam has also included. So I'm sure that so far it is in a planning phase, but I'm sure that these things will be operationalized also very soon. Hopefully.
Yeah. Operationalization is the question,
Yes,
because
absolutely.
NDM
Absolutely.
and every other document does mentions this thing, but operational, we saw during the
Yes.
COVID, we had to do, like, very
Right.
customized training for the multiple states. Anyway,
Right.
we all advocate for that. Thank you.
As whatever we are, I mean, working closely with the government also in these states, so we could find Bihar, Orissa, and Assam are doing some significant steps in this sector, especially in last 1.5 year they have done. Thank you.
If I may add to that, apart from the SHGs, things like awareness creation of the schemes, we are talking about social protection mechanisms, and people are generally unaware about how to access it, or how or the eligibility criteria, etc. Now, SHGs can play a really major role in that, in helping people access this. So just like you have this Jan Vigyan Kendra, Jan something Kendra, you have no service, community service kiosks. So if the
Suvidha Kendras.
Yeah. So if the community, the SHGs are given the right kind of training, we develop some specific modules on social protection mechanisms, on insurance mechanisms, things like that, and train some of them on this and attach them to these kendras. They will be able to really help the communities access these things. So this is a huge potential power that we have in our hands, which we can use. But Divya, my request is, the SHGs who are linked to the banks and they have started MSMEs, even they don't have disaster risk reduction mechanisms. Even they do not assess the risks. So the first training that we need to provide them is how to reduce their own risks.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Annie ma'am, Divya ma'am, and Shushmita ma'am, for answering those questions, and also our participants for engaging in the chat box. I hope Brijesh, Baba Sarkar, and Esther, your questions and comments have been addressed. And if there are any additional comments or inputs that you would like to share with us, or any questions that you would like to ask the panelists, please feel free to drop us an email and we will share the same with them and ensure that your queries are answered. And in terms of any reports that you would or studies you would like to share with us, please do send that on email as well. All the presentations that were used by our panelists will also be shared with you over email, as well as the session recording shortly. And once again, thank you to all our panelists. So we heard from Sushmita ma'am on how mental health and psychosocial support can be integrated for disaster assistance, specifically to women, and what are the strategies for the same. We heard from Dr. Nikhil on how existing relief norms can be adjusted to make them more gender responsive, and how they are also advocating for the same, and what are the measures we can take. And also we heard from Divya ma'am on case studies on gender case studies and examples of gender responsive disaster relief measures in terms of livelihood generation and ecosystem based restoration for long-term support. And we heard from Annie ma'am on what are the challenges of direct benefit transfer, but also in terms of strategies for strengthening these frameworks, and how we can address current gaps and challenges and recommendations for the same. So this has been very helpful, and we will compile all the inputs that we have received into a report and also share it with the relevant stakeholders. And thank you so much for engaging with us, and thank you to all the panelists and participants once again. And we look forward to your continued support.
Thank you.